Neuroticism. Well, welcome to Neuroticism. In this video, we're going to talk and do a deep dive on neurotic trait. It's part of the big five ocean, and we're going to look at the facets. We're going to look at the life outcomes. We're going to look at how to improve neuroticism if you're really high in neuroticism, and how to balance yourself out and have more calm in your life. And then we're also going to talk about how to know if someone's neurotic when you first meet them, or if it's someone in your family, to recognize neurotic behavior. And then, of course, how to talk to them best, how to communicate with them in the most effective way. And last but not least, the third thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how it combines with the other traits, because no one is just one thing, right? So what does it mean if you're neurotic and high in openness, or if you're neurotic and high in agreeableness, conscientiousness, or extroversion, or low in those things? So we're going to look at the combinations and the permutations. But before we begin, be sure to take the free personality test below. It's in the link. You can go ahead and click it, take the test. It only takes a few minutes, and then you have an idea of where you're coming from, which is very important, because if you're really high in any one trait, it's going to impact how you see that trait in other people, because in some way you're always going to reflect it back to yourself. And if you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell, tell us you like this sort of content. So let's begin. Neuroticism, what is it? Well, in some ways, this is kind of one of the hardest ones to do, because there's a sense of uneasiness about it, right? It's such a loaded word. Even no one would want to think that they're neurotic. Even culturally, we have this bad association with it. But I want to tell you that neuroticism in balance is a good thing. It's helped humanity survive because it alerts us when things are wrong, when there's danger around us, and it prevents us from moving forward. And when we have to defend ourselves, it allows us to do that more easily. So essentially, what neuroticism is the fear response. It's associated with a bunch of negative emotions. It also has a really strong genetic basis, about 50 to 60% heritable, and this is associated with the serotonin receptors in your brain. So it's more like people are wired to be neurotic, okay, to have a certain degree of it, and then the environment produces the other half or 40% or so. And we're going to explore how this works. But first, let's look at the traits, the trait description. What does it mean to be neurotic? Well, imagine that you're walking through a forest. You've never been there before. It's dark. You're hearing animals screeching in the background. As you look up at the sky, you notice that the sun is setting. All of a sudden, every little shadow is going to creep you out. The little noises in the back are going to scare the bejesus out of you. You're going to, wonder whether you should move forward or not. The hair on your back is going to stand, right? And we're designed this way for good measure, because the last thing we want to do is move forward into danger. And then if the danger does come, we want to be able to defend ourselves. So neuroticism helps with this. And it helps in two ways. One, you have the withdrawal facet of neuroticism. And this is associated with freezing behavior. So what is the withdrawal facet? That's freezing, being afraid, having doubts. Again, doubts in moving forward. Should I do this? Being easily discouraged. I don't know if I want to move forward. Feeling blue. Being self-conscious. I don't know if I can do this. Reflecting on your own limitations, faults, insufficiencies. Feeling depressed. Easily embarrassed. All these things prevent us from moving forward, right? Procrastination is another form of withdrawal. In relationships, you see this when you and a partner have a conflict and the person leaves the room, or they go to the other side, or they look away from you, right? These are withdrawal behaviors. Now let's look at volatility. Now imagine that you're in that forest and all of a sudden you hear an animal approaching you from behind, right? And the animal's right on top of you. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to defend yourself, so aggressively, right? Because the best defense in that situation is a good offense. So defensive aggression, you need to do it quickly. So the second facet of neuroticism is volatility. That's being easily upset, easily angry. People tend to be moody. They have to be hyperactive to frustration, to disappointments, to pain. They lose their cool quickly. They're loose cannons. They're snap at a finger off of the smallest things. So that's kind of an overview of the traits. Now, when you look at neuroticism, the other side of the spectrum is being emotionally stable. So that's essentially worrying versus being calm, being at ease versus being nervous, having self-pity versus self-satisfaction, secure versus insecure, irritable, touchy, moody versus calm, relaxed, and peaceful, and being in a high stress versus a low stress, relaxed situation. So that's essentially the trait. Now let's look at the key motivations and how it works. So there's different systems in the body, right? You have a hunger system, you have a pain system, you have an anxiety system, and so on. And pain, anxiety is a marker for pain, which is a marker for damage. So as we talked earlier, you're walking through the forest, you start to feel anxiety because that anxiety is a warning that danger might be ahead, right? And that you might experience pain. And the reason why you experience pain is a warning that you're experiencing damage and you might die. So you're having this loop that's giving you feedback that you should remove yourself from the situation as easily as possible. So anxiety is the key here. So people that are high in neuroticism have a lot more anxiety, and when they're in situations where there is a threat or uncertainty, that is going to increase. So how does that work? If you're high in neuroticism, you're naturally predisposed to look for these markers in the world, right? You're naturally looking for things that are uncertain. You're naturally looking for potential threats, and this manifests in all the different areas of your life, right? Because you're most of the time not walking through the jungle. Most of the time you're in an office, so you might perceive other forms of threats at the office. You might perceive other forms of threats in your relationships, other forms of threats in how you engage in the world. For example, should you invest or not invest? Should you buy Apple stock or not, right? Someone that's high in neuroticism will see more threats in these sort of risky behaviors. And since they're going to see more of them, they're going to feel more anxiety. And since they feel more anxiety, they're going to get more depressive symptoms and they're less likely to move forward. Okay? And this ends up having a lot of negative life outcomes. Some of those is that the life quality goes down. For one, in social situations, people that are high in neuroticism tend to be more shy. They're less likely to start up a conversation, which means they're going to have less opportunities to move forward socially in the world. They're going to have less opportunities because they withdraw themselves from the opportunities. They're going to be socially impaired because of the neurotic feelings that they're experiencing. The social support they would have is going to be not to the same quality as it would otherwise be because, maybe they're volatile. The job satisfaction is lower because, of course, they're filtering for threats, they're filtering for uncertainty, and they're experiencing anxiety. And whenever you experience anxiety, something interesting happens in your brain. That is, your creativity goes down, your work performance goes down, and it dips down substantially, right? And so you hopped up on cortisol versus you being calm and relaxed and being happy is two different versions of yourself, one of which is far more likely to be successful at work than the other one. People that are high in neuroticism also have higher divorce rates. They engage in more risky behavior like smoking, drug abuse. They make more impulsive decisions because, again, you feel like you're under threat. And what do? You make an impulsive decision. And this could be, a decision that's impulsive in the form of like fear of missing out, FOMO. It could be an impulsive decision where maybe you met somebody and you like this person and then you have like risky sexual behavior because you don't want to lose out on the opportunity. After all, why would they want you? You have all these sort of limitations, negative self-image. So you do something that you wouldn't do if you were feeling more self-confident. In terms of drug addiction, opiates, which reduce pain, and antidepressants that reduce depression are particularly appealing to people high in neuroticism, are more likely to have and be addicted or become addicted in opiates or antidepressants. From a health perspective, they're more likely to suffer from IBS, cardiac failure, asthma, eczema, and a number of other conditions. And then there's the personality disorder aspect of it. If you go too far of an extreme in neuroticism, it's associated with things like affection disorder, comorbidity, shamelessness, pessimism, need for social approval, need for admiration, self-disturbance, and psychopathy. So, in fact, the higher you are in N, it overlaps with some of the dark triad. Now, let's think about how people develop over time, because is it something that you can change? You know, this is important. So first, it's about 50 to 60% heritable, which means that the environment plays a pretty big factor in it, which is the great news. So the second big thing is that at a young age, boys and girls are about the same. Now, as they grow older, in adulthood, neuroticism decreases. Like early adulthood, you start to get to know the world better as a young adult. You start to see how you can function in it, and that's naturally going to increase your confidence, and you're going to see that there's not that many things to be threatened about, right? You can start to trust the world more. When you meet people for the first time and strangers and so on, you're not as happy, you're not as afraid. And whereas little children, they're little and they don't know very much. And so, of course, they're going to be afraid. And there's also a sex difference because, again, little children are more afraid. And for men, neuroticism decreases more in adulthood than it does for women. And I think a part of it is because of size. Like men are just physically larger, so they're less likely to be in a dangerous situation than a woman, for example. The thing that makes the biggest difference in terms of environmental effect on neuroticism is going to be how a person copes. So in terms of coping mechanism, and a lot of these traits in neuroticism, a lot of the facets, they're ways of coping with stress, they're with the unknown, with a threat, right? And there's parts of them that are very positive and effective. But if they're misapplied, you know, for example, if you're aggressive at work or you're aggressive at McDonald's driveway, it's probably not going to, you know, go very well. So you know, if you take the right strategy and apply it in the wrong place, you're going to have a bad effect, right? People that are high in neuroticism are more likely to have ineffective coping mechanisms and increase the amount of trauma in their life. If you're predisposed to neuroticism and you live in an environment that's highly neurotic and very unstable, you're more likely to have traumatic events in your life, experience trauma. That trauma is then more likely to increase your neuroticism. And then it becomes a vicious cycle where increased neuroticism produces more trauma produces more neuroticism, and it becomes a loop. Now, the way you get out of the loop, or the way that the loop breaks down, is to take the trauma and instead of letting it increase your neuroticism and thereby validating your threats or fears and that feeling of being afraid, instead to take the trauma as a learning experience. So people who took the trauma as a learning experience did not see an increase in neuroticism. In fact, they saw a decrease in neuroticism. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But the easiest way to decrease neuroticism is to have a good routine and a good plan. To declutter your environment so there's less things that are perking up in your environment and calling to you. And then also to think about what type of situations and what kind of goals you want to move towards in your life. Like, what do you really want to accomplish or achieve or create? And then once you're moving towards those goals, to take the smallest possible step that's meaningful, right? And it's more important to improve like 1% a day for a month or 2 months than to try to improve, 10% or 20 or 30% a day, right? Because it's a lot harder to do more than it is to do less. And you want to start somewhere where you could build on it. And if you're just improving 1% a day, at the end of the year, that's like a humongous improvement. So these are the major ways you can like decrease the neuroticism and increase the emotional stability. We'll talk about a few more at the end of this video. But in this process, negotiating with yourself is key. Now, let's talk about how you would know if you met someone who was neurotic or high in neuroticism. So either you're meeting someone new or it's someone in your family, right? So if the person is easily upset, moody, angry, they're always complaining about someone or something, they're always coming from this frustrated, disappointed, energy, then they're going to be higher neuroticism. You're going to notice it because they're not going to be very good at not showing that. When you're meeting for someone for the very first time, they might be shy. If someone's blushing, if they're engaging in certain body language that copes with stress, that's them experiencing neuroticism, right? Like this is an example, like you're hugging yourself, right? So learn the body language and look at which body postures are associated with managing stress, with being comfortable or uncomfortable. And that's where you want to start. When you first meet someone, are they comfortable or uncomfortable? Comfortable or uncomfortable? And then you'll notice, based on their comfort level, how neurotic are they? The other way you can see if someone's neurotic or not is how do they respond to uncertainty. When you propose something new and something different, are they usually the first to say no to it, or to turn away, or to withdraw from it? Another way you can tell if someone is neurotic or not is if a conflict emerges, what do? Do they leave the room? Do they look the other way? If you're telling them something that it's uncomfortable to hear, are they looking away or disengaging from the conversation? Are they finding ways to withdraw themselves from it? And last, you can tell by how they move forward in the world, right? Are they procrastinating things? Are they easily discouraged? Do they have a hard time? Do they have goals? Do they have a hard time moving towards their goals and achieving them? So these are the ways that you'll be able to tell. Now let's look at how neuroticism interacts with the other big five traits. And so first, we'll think about relationships. And then remember that no one is just one trait, right? People have many different traits and facets and so on. And within the big five, if their dominant trait is neuroticism, they're going to have other traits that they're going to be high in. They might be high in openness or conscientiousness and so on. And so let's look at that dynamic and see how the interplay between the traits looks. So first, in a relationship setting, if you have two people that are high in neuroticism, this is the recipe for a disaster, because you're going to have two people that notice all the problems that exist in the world, all the threats that are about us. They're going to notice. They're going to be uncomfortable with uncertainty, and this is just going to compound and it's going to create a high drama relationship. So if you're high in neuroticism, you want someone that is low in neuroticism to be your partner. Next, let's look at neuroticism and extroversion. So extroversion is the trait that's most associated with striving towards goals, being sociable, and positive emotions, whereas neuroticism is associated with negative emotions, right? So if you're high in neuroticism and you're high in extroversion, the difference between these two is essentially going to be your level of self-esteem. So ideally, you're higher in extroversion if you're also higher in neuroticism, so you can balance out. And hopefully you're a little bit higher in extroversion than you are in neuroticism. Hopefully your neuroticism is not your dominant trait, so you can have a positive self-esteem, which is more or less going to be the difference between the two. Conscientiousness. So conscientiousness and neuroticism have an interesting interplay, because of course conscientiousness is all about being orderly and also being industrious and being responsible and being self-disciplined. And these are the most important parts, because first, when you increase your conscientiousness, and that is whether you're highly conscientious yourself, you have a conscientious partner, or you're engaging in conscientious behaviors like making a plan, having a routine, having a clean, orderly environment. That way things are not a mess. what that does is going to decrease your neuroticism. So you definitely want to implement that sort of strategy. So increase orderliness will decrease neuroticism and the experience of it. Another part is impulse control. So people that are highly conscientious do something called effort for control. And what that means is that they're able to subdue impulses, they're able to delay their gratification, and they're also able to have self-discipline. And what that means is that when they're tempted by something, right, and any impulse is kind of like a temptation, they're able to think ahead and say, no, I'm not going to engage in that temptation. They're able to say no to temptations more easily. They have self-discipline. And so for people that are high in neuroticism, impulsivity comes through because they're afraid of missing out, or they think there's a threat right there that requires immediate response. And oftentimes that immediate response isn't the best one, right? So if you increase your self-discipline, what's going to happen then is that you're going to have less compulsive behavior. You're going to be less impulsive. And by being less impulsive, you're going to be less likely to smoke and engage in risky behavior. So that's a very important one. Agreeableness. So agreeableness is also one of those traits that has effortful control, right? And for agreeableness, an agreeable person moves through the world from the point of view of someone that wants to maintain positive relationships, okay? And they act as the social glue. So they have an inherent trust. Trust is one of the major facets of agreeableness. They naturally trust people. And whereas someone that's high in neuroticism, they might naturally be skeptical of people, right? So by being more trusting of people, it's easier for you to move forward in time and through the world, because most people are trustworthy. Most people aren't out to get you, right? And so it's a better overall strategy. It's better to move quickly and go through and meet 100 people and then maybe 2 or 3 bad apples, but you achieved your goal, versus meeting 1 or 2 people, let's say in a business environment, and not meeting your goal, right? Because you're skeptical of every person you meet, or you're shy or reserved or something like this, right? So when you increase your agreeableness on the trust dimension, what happens is your social phobias go down. It's more easier for you to move forward in the world. And then it also helps manage and decrease your depression. So any kind of depressive symptoms. And last but not least is openness. And openness is the creative trait. It's the part of us that wants to discover new territories, open new ideas, create new things. People like musicians, artists fall into this category, philosophers, scientists, entrepreneurs, people that are moving forward into the world. They're people that are moving forward into the unknown. They deal with uncertainty on a regular basis, right? In fact, they're always looking at things from a new point of view. They're always looking to explore things that are unknown, uncharted waters, which are inherently unstable. They're inherently uncertain. And so if you're high in openness, and you're high in neuroticism, what's going to happen is that openness is going to negatively impact your neuroticism. You're going to become more neurotic because a part of you is going to go explore some new area, which means that you're in essence sawing the branch that you're sitting on, and then your neurotic part's going to say, oh no, but what happens if this doesn't work out? The fear is going to come up. So on one end you're exploring something new, and on the other end you're terrified of what might happen as a result. So that's essentially openness and neuroticism. The best way to handle neuroticism is increasing your conscientiousness and your agreeableness, and then extroversion as much as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this sort of content, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on the next one.